Yo guys, Dr. Xenios here. Welcome to part 2 of my Nodevideo beginner tutorial series. In this tutorial, y'all will learn and understand how to use the 4 parameter modifiers, otherwise known as the editors, which are the expression editor, wiggle editor, audio reactor, and most importantly, the curve editor. Both the simple and full versions. Now I'm not gonna lie, this is not a really beginner-friendly topic. I actually wanted to add this in my Pro series and only explain the curve and wiggle editor. But I thought to myself, instead of explaining just these two, why don't I explain everything at the same time? But don't worry, I'll explain everything in so much detail that even a 5-year-old could understand. I'm gonna be starting from my most used parameter modifier, which is, you guessed it, the curve editor. Then work my way down to my least used parameter modifier, which is the audio reactor. By the way, if you haven't watched my first beginner tutorial, then what are you even doing here? Go watch it, then come back to this tutorial. So let's play the intro and get this tutorial started. The curve editor, the badass tool that every editor needs to master before they can become peak editors. Now before I explain the curve editor, y'all first need to understand exactly what a keyframe is. A keyframe is basically a value marker. It marks a specific value at a certain time. For example, let's say I add a keyframe here and move the layer and add another keyframe here. This is the value of the first keyframe and its respective time. And this is the value of the second keyframe and its respective time, and the action that takes place between these keyframes is called the animation. Let me break it down even further. Let's say this is a 100-meter racetrack, and we have this guy, let's call him Bob. Bob's position at the start of the racetrack is his first keyframe at time 0. And Bob's position at the end of the racetrack is his last keyframe at, let's say, 30 seconds. The process of Bob running is called the animation. Graphs simply alter that animation. They decide if Bob starts running slow but speeds up at the end, or Bob starts very fast but slows down later in the race, or even if Bob starts off slow, speeds up, then slows down again. But just remember this, no matter the graph, it will still take 30 seconds for the race to end and Bob to stop running. Let's take this shape animation. The number on the bottom left of the graph shows the value of the first keyframe, and the number on the top right shows the value of the last keyframe. This will help to guide you. The simple graph is quite easy to understand. The x-axis or horizontal makes the graph slower, while the y-axis or vertical makes it faster. Let's explain this with an example. Ledger of this graph makes the layer start fast and slows down over time. As you can see, it bends towards the y-axis at first, then slowly goes horizontally, which makes it slow. Here's another example. This graph will make the animation start off slow, speed up then, and slow down again. Remember, the tighter your graph, the stiffer and faster the animation, and the looser the graph, smoother the animation. Think of it like you're rolling a ball on a vertical wall, and rolling a ball on an inclined surface. Of course, the ball on the inclined surface rolls more smoothly, and also a bit slower. Now that's out of the way, I would like to talk about something called overshoot graphs. A graph overshoots when the curve extends past this boundary, therefore goes beyond the initial or final keyframe's values. Take a look at this shape animation. The first keyframe's value is 0.1 and the last keyframe's value is 0.4. But if I apply this graph, you can see the scale goes all the way up to 0.5. That's because the curve exceeded this point, which represents the value 0.4, so it results in values higher than it, but the animation will still end at the 0.4 value. This also goes the other way around. If I apply this graph, the animation goes lower than 0.1, then bounces back up. This principle also goes for the bounce graphs. Take this graph as an example. It starts from point 1, goes to the highest point, which is 0.4, goes back down a bit, then goes back up, and so on. Okay, now it's time to move on to the full curve editor, which is a bit more complicated than the simple curve editor, but ultimately follows the same principle. Now I know you may be asking, Xenios, what's the difference between the simple and the full curve editor? Let me answer that real quick. The simple curve editor is easy to use and understand and use for simple animations. In the simple curve editor, you can only see and alter the graph between 2 keyframes at a time. But with the full curve editor, although it's much harder to use and understand, you can see and adjust how each individual graph interacts with each keyframe. The full curve editor is mostly used for complex animations and isn't really beginner friendly. That's why I'll just be explaining the basics of it in this tutorial. The curves in the full curve editor have 4 different colors: red, green, blue, and gray. Red represents the x-axis, green represents the y-axis, and blue represents the z-axis. Gray is basically for any parameter which has neither x, y, or z axis like opacity, evolution, etc. Let's take a look at this simple shape animation. I added a keyframe at point 1, scaled it up to point 4, then scaled it back down to point 1. As you can see, the graph goes higher or lower depending on your values. If I make this value lower, you can see the graph now points downwards instead of upwards to represent how the animation takes place. To edit the full graph, select all the keyframes and click this icon. You will now have access to the graph handles. Let's say I want the animation to be slow, then speed up, then slow down again. I adjust the graph like this. As you can see, it still follows the same principle as the simple graph. Horizontal means slow, and vertical means fast. Here's another example. You can also add as much keyframes as you like. By tapping on one of the graphs, you'll gain access to a lot of graph presets. You can also ease all the keyframes by selecting all keyframes and clicking this icon. You can also apply this graph, which basically cancels the animation. You can also edit the X and Y graphs separately, which is helpful in creating some good position shakes and curved animations. To focus on a particular curve and edit the X, Y, or Z separately, select any of these. Same goes for the simple curve editor. If the layer is 3D, you can also edit the Z-axis separately, but let's not go there right now. This is a beginner series after all, and that's basically the all to know about the curve editor as a beginner. If you are enjoying this tutorial so far, leave a like and subscribe. The wiggle editor automatically makes a value like position, rotation, or scale, move, or wiggle on its own without you having to keyframe it manually. It's used to create smooth or random motion over time. This parameter modifier is extremely helpful. For those who use a light motion or blur, it can help you create effects like oscillate, pulse size, random displacement, blink, and so much more. Let me explain each of these settings. There are 2 types of wiggle, noise and sine. Noise is used to create completely random and jittery movement by picking random values. Sine creates a smooth back and forth movement by alternating between a higher and a lower value. Frequency is the speed of the wiggle. Higher frequency means higher wiggle speed. Amplitude increases or decreases the change in value. Higher amount means wider range of movement. Smaller amount means narrow range of movement. Phase shifts the starting point of the wiggle motion. It doesn't change speed or strength, just where in the wiggle cycle it begins. It's useful if you want multiple wiggles to move differently, even with the same settings. By the way, the wiggle editor can also be used in many other parameters, not just transform. Let's move on to the expression editor, shall we? So let's take a look at some expression examples. Alright, calm down, I'm just kidding. Let me explain what the expression editor does. The expression editor in Nodevideo basically lets you do a wide range of things to make editing easier using small bits of code. Trust me, you don't have to be a coding genius to use expressions. There are 4 simple expressions I use which anyone above the age of 7 could easily use and understand. The time expression, the loop expression, the wiggle expression, and the smooth expression. Let's start with the time expression. Here's an example of how to use it. Let's get this shape animation. Let's say I wanted to rotate 100 degrees every second. In that case, I simply go to the expression editor and add the expression time *100. And as you can see now, the shape now rotates 100 degrees each second. The time expression basically makes a value increase by a specific number each second. Here's another example. Let's say I want the phase of this wave warp effect to automatically increase every second by 0.5. Simply type time, star 0.5, and it automatically increases without the need for keyframes. Next, the loop expression. Here's how it works. Take a look at this shape animation. You notice that after the last keyframe, the animation stops. But if I type in the expression loop in, the animation loops after the last keyframe L. And if I type loop out, the animation also loops, but backwards. It basically reverses the animation, and when I type in loop in ping pong, the animation seamlessly loops back and forth. This is good for making repetitive animations. Next, the wiggle expression. It basically follows the same principle as the wiggle editor. Here's the formula. Let's say I want this layer to randomly wiggle over time. I just type in wiggle 1002. Here the frequency is 1 and the amplitude is 2. So if I increase the amplitude to 5, the layer has a wider wiggle range, and if increase the frequency to 4, it increases the layer's wiggle speed. Last but not least, the smooth expression. Let's use this animation as an example. As you can see by the guidelines, the animation is stiff and doesn't flow smoothly. But if I type in this expression, you can see the line becomes smoother. But if I increase this number to 0.5, you can see the line becomes even smoother. Although I recommend not increasing the number to anything above 1, because that might make the animation janky. So those are the 4 basic expressions I use. Let me try to explain this in the simplest way possible. The audio reactor is used to make your video effects or animations react to sound. In simple terms, it connects any effect or property like position, scale, glow, color, etc. to the beat, bass, or volume of your audio. For example, you can make a circle grow bigger when the bass hits. You can make your glow to flash with the music. The possibilities are endless. Let me explain some of the settings. First is the frequency channel. This controls which part of the sound spectrum the animation reacts to. Lower numbers target bass sounds such as kicks and low drums. Middle numbers target mid-frequencies like vocals and snares. And higher numbers target high-pitched sounds like hi-hats and cymbals. Adjusting this lets you sync visuals to specific parts of your audio. Next is the range scale. This controls how wide the sound range is. A small number makes it react to one part of the sound, and a big number makes it react to more parts of the sound. Amplitude. This controls how strong the reaction is. A bigger number makes your object move or grow more with the sound. Amplitude mult just multiplies the strength of the amplitude. When smooth is turned on, it makes the movement softer and less jumpy. It helps the animation flow smoothly with the music. The fall off is the main factor that controls the smoothness. This controls how fast the object goes back to normal after a beat. Small numbers make it fall slowly. Big numbers make it fall quickly. Acceleration controls how quickly the object reacts when the sound hits. Higher numbers react faster, lower numbers react slower. I know this might be a lot to digest, but hey, they say experience is the best teacher. It will be much easier if you use the audio reactor yourself and play with the settings than get used to them. And that brings us to the end of part 2 of my Node Video Beginner series. Hope you all loved the tutorial. Leave a like and subscribe if you did. Just so you know, if the tutorial was a bit too complicated for you, try your best to understand the curve and wiggle editors, as they are the most important. You can re-watch the tutorial as many times as it takes. Also remember, practice makes perfect, so try your best to use this tutorial as your guide for practice. Also feel free to check out my free or premium editing packs, depends on what works best for you. If you have any questions or confusions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments. Part 3 will be out soon, hopefully, so stay tuned. And if you still haven't watched part 1, the link is in the description. Enjoy your day, fam, and stay blessed.